Before this video starts, I want to go ahead and credit cherryistired for some of the art used in this video, along with multiple characters and plot concepts. Please go watch their video before watching this one, the link will be in the description. Oh, and sorry for the bad mic quality, I don't have a good audio setup, sorry. With all that being said, this is a fan-made concept storyline and narrative for a fan prequel to Deltarune based on the Undertale fan game, Undertale Yellow. As such, there are spoilers for Undertale, Deltarune, and Undertale Yellow ahead, so if you have not played any of those yet,
what are you doing here?
Go play them, they're amazing games. Also, I would like to go ahead and establish that although I am using characters and concepts by cherryistired, I may start to differentiate myself from the lore they are establishing in their own videos. I'd also like to just go ahead and say that I am not a character writer by any means, nor am I great when it comes to terms of formatting something like this, so please forgive me if this is a little rough around the edges. One last time, go sub to cherryistired and check out their content, and now, let's get into it. We open to some dialogue. We slowly fade to light, but suddenly cuts to black as we hear a door knocking. As she goes quiet, the room fades in. It's a small bedroom with a yellow and green bed, a small dresser that's slightly open to reveal several played outfits, all looking somewhat similar. A cowboy movie poster is pinned to the wall, slightly aged with time. A sun-shaped rug is draped over the center of the wooden-floored room. There's also a single striped shirt on the floor, looking almost discarded. The bed sheets flip back as Rowan, wearing pajamas, steps out of bed. Upon walking to the dresser and changing clothes, you can step out of the room and into a short hall, which leads down a set of stairs and into a small kitchen and living room. The house is somewhat messy, with stains on the countertop and wallpapers slightly torn in corners. Of course, you can interact with multiple things to get the subtle hint that whoever's taking care of Rowan is trying their best, but isn't perfect at parenthood. That, and there's a couple gags here and there. Leaving the front door, we meet our caretaker, Martlet, dressed in her work uniform. Just like in Undertale Yellow, although you get multiple responses to choose from, they are all reflective of Rowan's will and not the players, this moment being the first show of it, as the only thing you can do is forgive Martlet. Once again, there's no other choice other than what Rowan decides. I feel like now would be a good time to mention when this prequel takes place. This hypothetical game would take place only a few months prior to the events of Deltarune. Being in the middle of summer, and just like in cherryistired's video, takes place in the town of Eastville, which is east of hometown, which is primarily known for its green pines and yellow sunflowers. Getting back to the story, we begin to walk shortly behind Martlet in a cutscene, passing through the town and essentially getting a tour of the whole place. Martlet has some dialogue regarding her job and the current state of Eastville as a whole, but eventually you arrive at a strikingly large house designed similarly to that of the Ketsukane's house in Undertale Yellow. Rowan and Martlet arrive at the front door of the house and give it a knock. A small conversation begins between Sirova and Martlet before Martlet hugs Rowan and leaves. this point, Saroba walks off and you have the full house to explore. Just like in Undertale Yellow, the house is primarily inspired off of Japanese architectural styles, with large open halls and the similar decorations. While wandering the house, you can run into Axis, who is no longer a security bot in this universe, but rather a butler. He complains about how Kaneko is the one who gets all the love in the house, establishing a sort of sibling rivalry relationship between the two. You can also find a few family photos on certain walls in certain rooms, some dating back years, others more recent. But one pattern remains clear. Chujin is gone in the most recent entries. Finding Saroba and talking to her allows you to ask about either the house, her job, and about the current state of Chujin. Here are the responses to each. Exploring the house more, you'll find two doors, side by side. The left one, once interacted, will say, the other door, however, is locked. After you've thoroughly explored the house enough, you can eventually make your way to Kaneko's room and knock on the door. After a few seconds, a teenage Kaneko walks out of the door. Upon stepping into the room, you can see that there are impressive drawings taped and stapled across the walls in the room. Kaneko's bed is messy with several plushies scattered across and around it and on the floor. A couple shirts are also tossed around messily. There isn't much to examine, but Kaneko gets annoyed if you mess with the blinds in the room, which lowers the light. Talking to her while she draws, once you've seen all that you want to, you can head towards the door. gets up and dashes out of the room, and Rowan follows. Returning to the living room, Srova is looking around for something when Rowan and Kaneko enter. With quite a bit of hesitation, Kaneko sighs and walks off to the basement door. Following her, you arrive at the basement door that was previously inaccessible due to Rowan's non-desire to venture into it. She opens the door only to reveal pitch black, and a dark aura begins to ooze out from the basement doorway. Entering the basement, it's still just as dark, and Kaneko follows shortly behind. She walks around for a moment, her hands reaching outward to feel a wall, but she never reaches one as she goes off screen. She rushes back to Rowan. You now have a chance to look around, but walking in any general direction leads to Rowan eventually stopping with the text. If you try to leave, Kaneko will say, Talking to Kaneko, she says, As she nearly reaches the door, it slams shut. Suddenly, the floor drops as Rowan and Kaneko plummet into the darkness below. The world fades back in. Rowan is now clad in an attire fit more for a cowboy. The surrounding area is a dark, dusty desert. Rock paths guide the player through room after room. Along the path, wires and metallic contraptions are buried beneath the sands. A subtle few guitar notes can be heard ambiently playing in the distance. As the player presses Rowan forward through the dark desert, they eventually run into Kaneko, huddled beneath some debris. She pauses, looking around the empty space. The truth behind that statement kicks in as she rushes and grabs Rowan by the collar. Guide Rowan and Kaneko through the deeper desert. Along the way, you run into several electricity beacons that shoot spark projectiles you need to avoid on the overworld. Eventually, you reach a massive metal tower. At its apex, a beam of almost liquid darkness shoots from atop it, and at its base, an open garage door-style gateway. Above that, a holographic projection of the Deltarune. Walking through the doors and through the metallic halls, you reach an elevator. Stepping into it, the elevator begins to ascend to who knows where. A window behind the two in the elevator reveals a giant television screen coated in static, acting as this place's only source of light. Reaching the top of the elevator shaft, the two enter a large, dark room. Flickering lights shine off and on across the seemingly desolate room. At the center of it all, a hooded figure awaits. The figure becomes quickly alert and launches several bullets towards the two. They swiftly dodge as the figure begins to approach. The figure retaliates before initiating combat with the two. Combat in this game is almost identical to that of Deltarune, with some small differences. First, and most obvious, is that Rowan has a gun, and similar to that of Undertale Yellow, using it is a timing minigame. The gun itself is actually based upon a wristwatch that Rowan has in the Light World, and as such, when you select the fight option, the attack HUD is shaped like a clock, with its hands pointing to one of the 6 bullet slots Rowan has in his 6-shooter. When the ring in the slot is within the red area, pressing Z fires a bullet. You can continue to fire up to 6 bullets, dealing small damage per bullet, or until you mess up the timing. As for Kanako, they function similarly to that of Rousey, being the primary healer of the party, but whose scarf and magics can do some decent damage. This first fight is rather simple. Some basic friendliness pellet-like attacks are thrown around in groups of 1, and otherwise, the only other attack is a swing from a shadowy weapon that creates a wall of liquid black. To win the fight, all you need to do is wait out their dialogue. Eventually, the figure gives up their pursuit and realizes that they weren't lying about being lost. That, and he realizing that the two are something that he refers to as lighters. Whitefoot claps, and the lights begin to brighten. He turns to face the two, and almost like a parody of a teacher, he lifts his arm in a lecture. As he begins to explain, holographic images begin to pop up to accompany his explanation. Following Weifel to the rightmost room, we arrive at a training dummy where we get a simple battle set. This acts as the game's in-depth combat tutorial. In this tutorial, you also learn how Weifel fights. Weifel is the primary damage dealer of the party, with heavy-hitting attacks and a few status attacks that can lower the defense of certain enemies if timed correctly. While in this tutorial, this dialogue will begin. Once the training ends, Weifel leads us down another elevator and back into the desert wasteland. Heading east, the party arrives at a massive metal gateway. The metal gates open up, and the trio enters the neighboring dark world. Hey, quick break here. I want to go ahead and take this moment to establish just why I wanted Weifel's Dark World to be a desert cyberpunk wasteland, when their design mostly takes notes from Ralsei. Well, kinda. The main reason is because of a spoiler, so I'm not going to share it, but the other is that I wanted to establish a contrast between Weifel and Ralsei. Just as Azrael is an almost opposite reflection of Flowey in Undertale, I wanted Ralsei to be the same way for Weifel since they are based off of the same characters from that universe. Well, technically speaking. Also, while we're on this break, I also want to say that there would be a talk functionality just like there is in Undertale Yellow, accessible in the menu, but I'm not going to write all the dialogue for that. Sorry, not sorry. Now, back to the narrative. The Lost Canyons are the first major dark world in this game. An entire society trapped within the walls of a canyon. Their people, blissfully ignorant to the horrors that their emperor has done. The major areas of this dark world consist of the canyon's edge, the internal forest, the white fields, and finally, the floating fortress, where the dark fountain is emanating from. The canyon itself is a brownish-red color with boxy patterns and primarily patrolled by the elder rabbits. The forest is a more colorful place, with free-flowing and loose designs, and are primarily guarded by the petal blades and sentinels. The white field is, you guessed it, white, with colorful flowers lining the fields, and it's often patrolled by the Hue gardeners, but it's made untamed by the wild Croodles. From there, it's a simple walk to the floating fortress, a massive complex hung over a deep pit that's said to house a horrible beast. Within the floating fortress is the emperor of this dark world, Count Cell. Shortly after first entering the canyon's edge, you run across the first blue save point. After about 25 minutes or so of your usual Deltarune walk around and find funny dialogue and have some fun encounters, you reach the end of the canyon's edge where this interaction occurs. Kanto quickly finds a rock and sits down on it. Talking to Kanako again after this interaction, Talking to Weifel while here, he'll say, Entering the internal forest, we begin to run into the petal blades and the sentinels. Eventually, while wandering through the forest, this interaction will play out. Continuing through the forest, we eventually reach the edge of it, where this occurs. Suddenly, in a smoke screen, a warrior-like figure appears. Ezeraath then vanishes in a smokescreen. Walking forward a few more steps. This fight is designed to teach the player the rules for the blue and orange attacks, as well as being the first real boss of the game. In order to beat the fight in a pacifist manner, you need to first use the distract or distract X commands in the X menu. This will give you an opening to use the X bluff action, which will loosen Ezeraath's grip on the blade. Using the distract X command uses Weifel's turn, while X bluff uses Konako's turn. The fight ends whenever Ezeraath throws his blade accidentally. Continuing into the white field, it's just a couple colored puzzles and a few more fights and some banter before reaching the next major boss. Along the path, you'll run into the Hue Harvesters and the Croodles, the two major enemies of this area, as well as this one NPC interaction that my friend requested that I put in. Upon reaching the edge of the white fields, a loud whirring begins to play. The whirring gets louder as a giant yellow machine slowly approaches from the top of the screen. The three begin to back up. The machine stops and a PA PA system activates, and a face appears on the front screen. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't thought this fight out at all. So hey, I guess that gives something for the comments to do. But until then, cut the battle music. After passing the fight, we arrive at the shadow of the floating fortress. Suddenly, Ezeraath lunges down from the screen and slashes at Toby, sending them flying back. As he says this, several passengers jump down and the screen goes black. As the screen fades back in, we can see the three heroes on a long bridge-like platform underneath the floating fortress, standing just above the Great Pit. Two of the guards come over. They untie a rifle as they walk off the screen. A large chain can be heard snapping. Slowly, a large, dark, black creature with a long, toothy mouth comes from the depths of the pit beneath the floating fortress. Walking around the area, you'll encounter several guard bots acting as enemies. There are also several NPC interactions you can come across in this area. Eventually, you can reach a locked door. A voice can be heard on the other side once it's knocked upon. Eventually, you can find a panel hidden behind a puzzle. Once pressed, a rumbling begins, and then a roar. A massive gust of air pushes the two out of the mouth of the beast. From this point, you can enter the floating fortress in one of two ways, the left or right pillar. Climbing up the staircases, you would eventually run into a mini-boss, which I didn't design. I just feel like the player needs a new challenge here and I couldn't figure out something, so you decide. Then, once you enter the actual fortress, your goal is to make your way to the center of the bottom floor and climb your way up to the top floor. Along the way, you'll encounter both the Ribbon Serpents and the Reflection Serpents, along with the Silver Sentinel, which does more damage and has a different sparing method than its internal forest counterpart. Upon arriving at the top floor, we see this argument occurring between Lightful and Ezeraath. The two Lightners come rushing in. This fight plays out very differently compared to his first encounter. His attacks are faster and stronger, and once you try the same strategy as the last fight, nothing will happen. At this point, the only thing you can do is try and whittle their health down. As well to it, Ezeraath will sometimes talk about how certain things just weren't his fault. Eventually, you'll get his HP down to 10. At this point, Ezeraath will drop his sword and fall to his knees. At this point, you now have complete access to the entire fortress, which is now filled with various people to talk to. But again, I'm not writing all of that. At this point, talking to Ezeraath will trigger this dialogue. leads into the room with the beating heart of the pit beast, but the walls and floors are like that of a dojo, with the figure awaiting at the far end. This is obviously the first secret boss of the game, and is intended to be the easiest to access in the entire game. But that's not to say it's easy. This is also the only secret boss that you are allowed to flee from. The fight utilizes the lasso mechanic from Undertale Yellow's Starlow boss fight, where you're tethered to the center of the boss. Of course, just like in Undertale Yellow, it can be broken. In order to free yourself from the tether, you need to have Boeing hit you with a targeted attack. Once you're released from the binds, you can now finally actively fight. In order to spare him, you need to unravel him while you're untied. This is done through a stability gauge. Starting at 100% stability, and a standard unravel will release 5%, whereas an X unravel will use Konako's turn and releases 10 to 12% randomly. The fight has no dialogue other than a few occasionally repeated lines from Boeing, as he talks about his desire to somehow beat everything and everyone in combat. He will also occasionally re-tie you after being untied for some time. The fight is complete when either his health is depleted or he's completely unraveled. And although it's hard to tell, he's designed to be as if he's held together by various martial art belts. And so, when you completely unravel him, all that's left is his head. I will not be discussing the actual fighting method of defeating him, as I want to stick to the pacifist route. And so, using the unravel to eventually spare him, the dialogue plays out like so. This is now your final opportunity to go to different stores and collect as many items as possible for the coming boss. But once the player is ready, they can approach the great door at the top of the fortress. Reaching the summit of the fortress, we are met face to face with Emperor Council, their eyes closed and their body obscure. Ezeraath jumps in the fray and attempts to get a jump on the three heads, but is swiftly taken down. This fight is the most complex of the ones I've discussed. Each head of the Emperor has a different functionality. The leftmost head is the most chaotic of the bunch, and is the one with the lighter voice. They will randomly target one of the party members with a very difficult bullet pattern. The middle head is the deepest voice, and the most logical of the bunch, targeting all three with the easiest bullet patterns. The rightmost head is the medium voice, and targets the party member with the highest health, and deals the most neutral bullet patterns. Each head gets an individual turn. However, this is not the case for the head that was dealt the most damage before their turn. If no damage is dealt to any heads, 2 random heads will attack. At phase 2, the heads shape themselves and start swapping positions, so you must memorize which one you want to attack the most. Each party member is also given a unique act dedicated to themselves for this fight. Rowan gets Bolster, which increases everyone's speed temporarily. Konako gets Brace, which temporarily increases everyone's defense. And Whiteful gets Steady, which increases everyone's attack temporarily. The fight ends when enough damage is dealt to each head. The two then rush off to go and seal the fountain. As the world fades back in, we can see that we're now inside an abandoned bedroom inside the Ketsukane household. Suddenly, Soroba comes rushing into the room. Rowan turns and spots the suitcase that's underneath the bed. Soroba takes the suitcase and begins to walk upstairs. She continues, fully leaving the bedroom. After a few seconds, Kaneko runs over and hugs Rowan. Kaneko then also walks up the stairs, leaving Rowan to explore the room. Scattered around the room are sheets of white paper and a crayon box, an old carpet, a dried up plant that's petals have begun to fall off, and a bag of 20G, which you can take for money. There's also a pair of glasses on top of the bed. Interacting with them, as well to it, above the bed there are 3 masks, each one representing a certain member of the Ketsukane family. As you leave, you lock the door behind you. You are now once again free to walk around the house. Interacting with Axis prompts him to sob over the fact that he nearly lost his only sister and how he should have never taken her for granted, and begs Rowan for forgiveness, only for him to immediately realize that she's fine and can go back to hating her. Heading back into the kitchen, you can find Kaneko's room results in no response. She's probably asleep. Going outside and beginning to walk down the steps, we're interrupted by Martlet. Immediately upon seeing Rowan, they run up and hug them. After having said this, she flaps her wings and flies up into the sky. And yes, she can still fly, even though as far as we're aware there's no magic in the light world. She's still a bird. Flying is kind of a natural thing for her. Anyway, from this point you now have access to all of Eastville to explore, and I will now start listing off all of the best interactions you can do while here. To the west of the Ketsukane's house, you can find the town hall. Walking inside, you can find the honeydew shopkeeper behind a desk. Or, well, I guess she's the Eastville Town Hall receptionist now. She needs a proper name. Anyway, talking to her, continuing west, we reach a dark purple household with candle-shaped lights on its exterior. To its left, a small patch of corn. Knocking on the door, heading northwest from here will lead back to Martlet's house, and to the northeast, a small bed of flowers beside the town's library. Interacting with the door, from the library, heading east across the street, we reach Sunnyside Farm. This is the most open area in the map. There's a small patch of well-grown sunflowers. Interacting with them, heading north from the patch, you reach a house. The door is locked, but you can interact with Starlow's mom, who's on the porch. Walking off the porch and further north, you reach a barn, but it's currently locked. Heading slightly southeast into the massive cornfield, you reach a small open area with a scarecrow, a cherry blossom tree, and Starlow's dad, Solomon. Interacting with the scarecrow, interacting with Solomon, leaving the farm and heading somewhat northwest above the library. Although you can't see it on the current version of the map, there's a police station. Inside, you'll find Starlow, asleep on the counter. Heading northeast from the sheriff's office, you can head to the apartment complex. I find it quite simple, actually. There are multiple doors that you can knock on to get a response from. Here are some of these responses. Heading north from the apartments, you reach Bailador's, a local dance club. Entering it, you meet a bouncer. That one depressed guy from the bar in Undertale Yellow is also sitting down at a table here. All of the crab enemies from Undertale Yellow are dancing on the dance floor. Going around the dance floor, you meet El Bailador, dressed in a nice suit and tie. Heading west from Bailador's, you arrive at Dinah's Eatery. Entering, you can interact with Dinah. There really isn't much here to interact with other than the jukebox, which can change the musical track to any song that's available. Aside from that, there's also a couple cacti, a pool table, and a few neon lights strung on the walls. Heading west from Dinah's, you reach the town sign. Beneath the sign, there's a notice pinned to one of the poles holding it up. Heading back down southwest, you once again arrive at Martlet's house. Entering the house, Martlet is making some kind of dinner in the kitchen. A lot of the dialogue for the house is the exact same as it was when you started the game. Trying to walk upstairs prompts Martlet to say, walking over to Martlet and talking to her plays out this dialogue. As they sit and eat, Martlet starts another conversation. closes the door as Rowan walks over to the dresser, changing back into their pajamas, and gets back into bed. Well, what'd you think? I'd like to take this time to get my final thoughts out before the video ends. First and foremost, I did kind of break cherryistired's lore at multiple points. Most obviously, I made Rowan have more friends than cherryistired is seeming to imply. I figured for as small of a town as Eastville is, Rowan is bound to be considered friend by most of the residents there at that point. Another one is Soroba, particularly her house. Cherryistired stated that the Ketsukane house is abandoned in their most recent video, while I did not. This is because Cherry's video came out as I was recording this, and as such, a lore break or two was inevitably bound to happen. Another one is Chujin's fate. Cherryistired has stated in their most recent video that Chujin is dead in this universe. However, for my own interpretation of the story, yeah, no, they're not dead. They're not dead at all, they're just missing. Now, as for the whereabouts of Chujin, I'm not telling you, because spoiler. Another major lore break is the addition of the character of Gage. As you may have guessed at this point, Gage is the sibling to Rowan. They are and will be the only additional Lightner character that I add to the lore. Now, you may be asking, what happened to them? I mean, can you not tell? They're dead. And speaking of Cherryistired lore breaks, Cherryistired, if you are watching, hi, how are you? How you been? Jokes aside, thanks for letting me use the concept. This has been really fun to work on, and if you're okay with it, I was actually planning on doing 5 total chapters for this whole thing. I'll be trying to keep to your lore as much as I can, but I can't promise that it'll be exactly how you describe it. I'll try and keep an eye out on your future artworks for the series, and be basing almost everything off of that. That being said, there's one thing I want to get out of the way. A, I already fully planned out Chapter 2, and I just need to write the script for it. And B, I planned 6 endings, with all 6 endings having a unique and different outcome. There's still a couple things I need to finalize about them, but they're pretty much already set in stone, and I want to try and see if I can fit them in as best as I can to your lore. Either way, at this point, I'm going to take at least a 1-week break from this because, oh, this was mentally taxing. My brain cannot take like 5 more minutes of clip champ even if I needed to. Oh, and one last thing before I sign off on this video. I'd like to credit IsysDaUser, sorry if I butchered that, for the song Rude Blaster that I used in the video. So go and check out IsysDaUser's song and Cherryistired's video and their channels. The links will be in the description. That's all from me for now. I'll see y'all on the flip side.